Welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. I'm Miff Galloway, a performance coach passionate about supporting ambitious and high-performing women just like you who know they have untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. If you're looking to massively up-level your performance in all areas of life, you've come to the right place. My goal on this podcast is to take you beneath the surface so you can connect with yourself on a deeper level while providing you with valuable insights and the tools necessary to navigate life's challenges and go after your goals with strength, clarity, and wisdom. If you're ready to uncover the truth which lies underneath so you can recognize your powerful feminine leadership style, pursue your goals unapologetically, and thrive in every aspect of your life, hit the follow button and get ready to explore the incredible possibilities that lie within you. Together, we'll uncover your next steps in achieving peak performance, because actually, you can.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. For today's episode, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Katherine Lazaruk, who comes from a performance and education background with a bachelor's degree in music and education from the University of British Columbia. Before starting her business in 2007, she divided her time between singing in the opera, teaching music to primary school students, and even did a stint in a corporate training at one of the big 5 accounting firms. She has since built a multi-six-figure executive presence consulting practice, accelerating women into senior leadership and helping them to stay there. One of the ways she does this is by helping women and men learn to walk, talk, and act like leaders. She is the author of the book Executive Being, Humanizing Business One Leader at a Time, which talks about how we need to show up with our whole selves now more than ever and how to do it in a world that's tried to keep women in a box. From our chats offline just now, I know we're going to have such a great conversation. So welcome to the show, Katherine.
Thank you very much, Miff. It's great to be here. You're a powerhouse. I'm a powerhouse. Let's get it on.
And so I'd love for you to kick us off by sharing a bit more about what is image consulting. I know that's one of the many talents that you have. So kick us off by starting there.
So it's interesting. I started my business first in straight image consulting, which is everything from appearance to behavior to communication. So it's all encompassing. When people think of image consultants, they often think of stylists, which are really concerned about fashion and the appearance of somebody, as opposed to this much more holistic deep dive into who a person is and how they want to show up and how they're going to achieve goals using their appearance, behavior, and communication to do that. And it's interesting. I'm a bit of an outlier in my profession because I don't like fashion and I hate shopping. And but what I do love is the idea of self-expression. And your image is part of your presence, how you show up, the way that you look, the way you roll in the world. All of that is part of who you are as a person and as a leader. And that's what gets me going. It's the juice underneath it that I find interesting, the psychology of it.
We're going to bond over our mutual distaste of shopping. I just know. And so I'm interested to hear, how did you end up here?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing for anyone in your audience who's stuck in a career that they hate, that's kind of soul sucking. That's what happened to me. So as you mentioned earlier, I started my career singing professionally in the opera and teaching elementary school. And the farther along I got in both of those careers, the less I liked them, because both of those careers have quite narrow parameters. And I'm not a very good small box person, but I didn't know that. It took me, well, I kind of knew that. I suspected it, but there I was in this box, and it took me 12 years and a lung tumor to figure out that I was suffocating. That I could not do it. There was no way for me to stay. So I went on medical leave and then I quit. And 6 months later, I had a job doing corporate training. And in between that, I was working with a coach. And he said, kind of an alpha male dude, and he said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, little lady? And I mean, today I'd be like, you're fired. Don't talk to me like that. But back then it was funny. I laughed. And I had a vision. So for all the visual thinkers out there, this had never happened to me before. It has never happened since. But at that moment, I literally had this little vision of the first company name and the tagline that I used. And I started to laugh. It was like image consulting. And I was like, that's not even a job. Like, That's not real. Who does that? And he looked at me and said, it's a real job. You could do that job. And I was stunned. And I thought, okay, well, I look all right. I've read some books. I will get a business card and a website and start practicing. So that is what I did. I do not recommend that approach to anybody. Now, for image consulting, please get some training, because when you start out, image is a very sensitive topic. It's highly personal, and you can do a lot of damage in somebody's closet without realizing it. So please get some training. However, there I was, kamikazing my way into it. And I built my business around my corporate training job for 2 years. And when the recession hit, I was like, okay, this is a great time to go full time. And actually, it's funny. My husband told me a couple of years ago, he goes, when you said you were starting an image consulting business in the recession, I thought you were crazy, but I didn't say anything. I'm like, good man. Good. He didn't say anything. And so what happened was then I went, like, when I got my corporate training job ended, I was divinely ejected. I was like, okay, this is it. So then I went to Toronto here in Canada and got my certifications in image consulting and advanced image consulting from the International Image Institute here in Canada. And then I interned at that company. And then Karen, who runs that company, she's amazing. She liked me, so she made me her Western Canada image trainer. So in addition to my private practice, I was also training consultants how to be consultants at Langara, which is a college here in Vancouver. And then as my clients went up the chain in their respective jobs, they started to say to me, look, we want you to come and work with our executive teams, but we're tired of explaining to the people that write the checks that you're not really an image consultant, that you're more than that. So we need you to change your business. And I'm like, great. So I just changed it to Lazaruk Consulting, and now I can do what I like.
I love that. And so in terms of the work that you do, I love the quote, like, people judge a book by its cover. What does that quote mean in your profession?
It means that there is science behind the impressions that people have of you when they meet you and as you continue to be with them. So there's first impression, there's lasting impression. And the longer you know someone, the closer those things come together. So if I do image exercises around impressions with people that have known each other for a long time, generally their read is pretty accurate, regardless of what the person looks like. If I do image exercises with people who have not known each other for very long, the answers are usually not very accurate, unless the person has already given some thought to who they are as a person and how they want to show up on the outside. But there is science behind it. So our brains are like giant filing cabinets. That's how we grow through experience. And so over the years, the filing cabinets get full of all kinds of things, of what your parents tell you, about what your community tells you, about what your religion tells you, about what your culture tells you. And you start to have these lenses that you look through at the world. So what happens is you start to meet people and you cannot help it. It is not possible to be aware. It's completely unconscious bias. If you want to try to override it, you have to work hard. And so if you're a leader and or if you're someone who wants to get different results in your life, it makes sense to apply those tools to your own life in order to help people know you faster, know you better. It's like a little appetizer, a little amuse-bouche, right? The way that you look, it needs to make sense with who you are and what you're doing. And so over time, I've developed my 3 C's of credible presence, which are character. Who you are at 4 is who you are at 104. That does not change. At the core, that's who you are. So that's your values, that's what you enjoy, that's your personality style, that's all of the things that have shaped you, all of your stories, your experiences, your character. Who are you when nobody's looking? And then you need to consider congruence, which is how close does your inside match your outside? You have to think about then, what industry are you in? Where do you live? What's your background? Where do you want to go? How closely do those things overlap? It's who you are and what they expect, what people expect to see when they see you. And I had my own experience of this in image consulting when I first worked with my first serious business coach. And at the time, I was really far into the self-expression side of that. And I was like chunky, funky, and very down to earth. And I had my Hilroy's 5-subject spiral notebook with my glitter pen. I just loved it all. And I came in for the first session with him into the boardroom, sat down, had my book on the table. He walked into the room, left without saying a word, and came back with a moleskin hardcover, with a little bookmark notebook, and put it down beside my Hilroy 5-subject spiral notebook. And he said, I want you to transfer all your notes from that into this, and I never want to see that on my table again. And I was like, what do you mean? My clients love how down to earth I am. And, we bond over hating shopping, all these things. Like, what do you mean? And he goes, what kind of consultant are you again? And I went, an image consultant? And he's like, exactly. The details matter. And so that was my own experience with going, okay, do I look like what people expect me to look like? And then the third C, so we've got character and congruence. The third C is choice, because then you can decide. So I had to decide, do I go further into this full-on self-expression piece, or do I honor all the parts of myself, including the part of myself that has a high level of attention to detail and loves that? Or do I consider who I'm meeting and where I'm going and think a little bit more about that, and then make some minor adjustments so that I'm still who I am when I'm showing up, but I fit better into that environment? And I sharpened up my image, and my business doubled that year. That was all. I mean, was I doing other things? Yeah, but really the most significant thing was I actually changed my own look to be a little bit more corporate, and it really worked.
There is so much there. I'm taking bulk notes. That's why I'm looking to my side. I apologize if that's distracting. I'm like, I need to write all this down. First thing I'd like to ask is, what would you say to someone who, when you mentioned that you potentially tailor your look to suit different environments, what would you say to someone who's like, but that's not authentic? Like, that's not who I am.
Right. You have to think of yourself as a piece of equipment, like a stereo, right? You can turn the volume up, you can turn the volume down, but you're still the same piece of equipment. So it is still completely authentic. So for example, there are things I love about the corporate world. And so when I am there, I am authentically showing up as the shit disturber that people hire me to be. And I'm still like, you would never find me in a navy 3-piece suit, for example. I would die. I would be so bored. Forget it. But you might see me in a bright pink suit with cigarette pants. Or you might see me in, I remember the first custom suit I ever had made was a gray, beautiful wool suit, but it had a double collar. It had a funky pair of pants. So it's a suit, but it's not the standard corporate suit. Whereas I have a client who is a lawyer. She knew she was going to be a lawyer when she was 8 years old. She loves everything about the law, and she loves everything about the rigidity of it. And everything about her, like her suits are identical practically. Like they're in the right color palette. They are really suit her. They're beautiful. The fabric is gorgeous. She loves them, but they're all and I would die. So when I hear someone say it's not authentic, yes. If you are in a place that is completely out of, like where you're very different at work than you are at home, you are lying to yourself somewhere. There has to be some congruence. And that can also be a good signal. If you're in an environment that doesn't feel at all like you, then actually you can choose to find a different environment that suits you better. You would never plant an orchid. Actually, orchids grow all over, so not a great example. Dandelions grow all over too. But you would never plant a succulent, for example, in soil that held a lot of water, because the succulent would die, right? You want to put a succulent in fast draining soil. And then you don't blame the plant for dying. You blame the environment. And this is where I think leadership fails a lot of the time, is that they want people to come and play in their sandbox, but they don't want to adjust the sandbox at all. And that doesn't work for people anymore. So by all means, stick with who you are, stick with your character, start there. And that's what you build on.
Two things come to mind when you share that. I remember I had a role working in property, and I rocked up for my first day. I was in corporate, but I was wearing flat shoes because I don't like heels. I like the look of heels, but that is not my vibe. And I remember one of the other females there being like, we wear heels here. And I was like, well, I don't. Sorry. I just don't agree with what they do to your biomechanics, all that sort of stuff. And I realized that
Right.
for me, that was probably a disservice because I didn't look the mold that they wanted to in this particular environment. I did great work and they're really happy with that. But I think I always felt just a little bit uncomfortable with because of what I needed to look like in that environment, that it was never going to be a long-term thing. It did feel a little bit inauthentic. It was good work, but just who I needed to show up as, I was like, no, that's just not my vibe.
So did you keep wearing flat shoes or did you wear heels?
I wore flat shoes and I just did it, but you could just tell that I was the only one doing it.
Yeah. So when you're a challenger, can't be upset when people are challenged. Can't be upset when you feel uncomfortable. If you're challenging a stereotype deliberately, that's fine. I did have a client who was voluntold to come and see me, and because she wasn't really getting along very well, it was an MBA class, and she wasn't gelling very well with the class. And she's dyed blonde hair, blue contacts, very California kind of clothing. She looked great. And I think she also had a PhD actually. She was very, very brilliant, like a brilliant engineer. And we had a conversation and I said, people want to know you, but you don't have to hit them in the face with a hammer, which is essentially what you're doing. You look so different from everybody else in the environment that's what's causing this. It's not who you are, I don't think. It's how this is rolling. And I said, so you can choose to make a change. And she goes, I don't want to. I will go find an environment where they accept me for who I am. And I'm like, great. And to this day, she works in corporate and she still looks like a beautiful, blonde, gorgeous woman who loves the surprise factor when people have this perception of her as someone who's not smart, but she's brilliant. So she loves that flip and she loves challenging the stereotype. And that means that she had to come to peace with being uncomfortable because she's deliberately choosing to challenge, which is great. We need representatives, right, to challenge these things. But you get to choose, right? You decide. And so for you, yes, personally, I think if high heels were so great, men would still be wearing them. But here we are. So if you're going to wear flat shoes, power to you, flat shoes. I love that they're wearing flat shoes at con now too. Like it's starting to become a realization where it's like comfort does have a place in the world. Like if you look at Christian Louboutin shoes, they are so uncomfortable. They're the worst. And who's designing them? A dude, right? That dude's not wearing his own shoes. Come on.
I was about to say,
Like, get real.
Wear your own shoes.
Yeah. Walk a mile in shoes and then see how you want to design them.
And I love what you mentioned around choice. I think that's a really key piece and my husband loves it when I talk about him on the show, but he works in government and he's a project scheduler. He wears long sleeve t-shirts and pants every day to work because he has full body tattoos. And so he knows if he walks into those environments, especially the old ducks are going to be like, what the hell? Who is this young dude who's covered full of tats, who's a little bit direct in his communication? He's a lot of fun. But if you took him from face value, you'd be like, who's this tattooed dude? What does he know about projects? And he can't manage this defense project schedule. Like what's he doing? And so he's making the conscious choice to go, I'm going to, I guess, cover this part of who I am because I know it just by base of people's conditioning, he's going to get judged for it. But you see him out in the real world as a civilian and you wouldn't even recognize him. You're like, what the fuck? Where did all those tattoos come from?
Right. And so what I'm digging into now, or what I'm noticing now, is the world used to be more conducive to people doing those things to fit in. And now the world is shifting to be, you need to broaden your horizons a little bit on what you think leadership looks like and what you think competent people look like. Because you can have blue hair and a body full of tattoos and be incredibly competent at your work. And that has nothing to do with your work. So it's a little bit incumbent on people in that sort of 40, 50, 60 age bracket to really think about how they need to change their perception. So in my book, I have a little bit of a piece on that, where it's the paradox of perception. If you're so conditioned to, like, if we continue to allow ourselves to follow the stereotype will always be there. But if we are brave enough to step outside that stereotype and do things a bit differently and to encourage the older leaders to change their viewpoints, that's going to make it easier for everyone. So there's two pieces that are important there. One, if you're a leader over 40, you need to have a mentor who's under 30. So they can teach you about this fundamental social change that's happening. Because it's not just It's not just millennials in the workplace. It's not that. This is fundamentally society has changed. And that seismic shift is really difficult for leaders of a certain age and stage. So that's the one thing. So if you're over 40, get yourself a mentor under 30. And the second piece is thinking about how you need your sandbox to change. So if you're a senior leader in a company and you're finding you're getting high turnover, your retention rates are not good, that is a leadership failure, not an employee failure. And historically, society has always put all of that on the employee. But it's much more of a two-way street now than it used to be. That's why large professional services firms can't necessarily fill the pipeline, because nobody wants to burden churn anymore. Nobody wants to work the 80-hour work weeks because we know that that's stupid and counterproductive and completely inhuman. And this is the thing, is like, if we are not allowing for humanity now in the workplace, particularly now that we have AI and machines to do the machine-like things, we're going to be left behind. Any leaders that are not thinking, oh, these are human, total people. These people have feelings. Feelings and the body give us a lot of information. So if we're just running around only operating from the head up in everything, we're going to be in trouble. And if we're only looking at metrics in our company that are about money, we're going to be in trouble, because people are humans. People are complete beings, and they want to be seen, heard, and valued. And that goes for younger people and older people, right? We've got the 5 generations in the workplace now, right? We want to be able to see the voice of experience, but the voice of experience, it's not just one way anymore. So any leaders that are sort of relying on that model of hierarchical, compartmentalized, authoritative, it's gone. It doesn't exist. Right now, it's integrated, relational, and whole. So if you cannot look honestly at the people coming in and see beyond the full body of tattoos, then that's on you. That's your conditioning that you need to overcome.
And I'm
Right?
and I'd love to dig into a couple of things a little bit more. So first, you had the example of your client who decided that she wasn't going to change her appearance, and she found an environment that she could show up however she wanted to, and that was great. What about for someone who's like, I understand how important image is. Like, you talk about communication, and people are looking at your body language and what you look like, and they're probably not really paying attention to what you're talking about. And so if someone's like, yep, I understand the importance of my image. Yes. And they want
Yeah.
to, I guess, refine that for the environments that they want to be in, just sort of like what yourself has done. How can they start to do that?
There are many different ways, many different roads to Rome, right? Lots of different entry points to that. One of the ways to do it is through your image. So you can look at what's your personal coloring, what's your body shape, what's your personality style, what's your work style, your industry. You can start to think about, okay, if my industry is banking, what do they expect in that industry? What do I like about that industry? What do I want to wear that would make me look more like a banker if that is what I want to be? And I highly recommend getting professional assistance for all of these things, whether it's with me or somebody else. One of my favorite colleagues lives in Melbourne, Imogen Lamport, and her blog, Inside Out Style, is fantastic. Highly recommend checking her stuff out. In fact, I send clients there for research all the time because I don't want to do that kind of research. And she's brilliant at that kind of research. So I'm like, knock yourself out, go there. Right. So I do recommend getting a little bit of professional help with those pieces, because it's very hard to see yourself. And going to your friends and family, they may have great intentions and they may have a good eye, but they may not understand how to put things together for you that suit you, which is why sometimes we go shopping with a friend and end up with things in our closet that we're never going to wear again, even though they swore up and down that it looked great. Didn't feel comfortable, wasn't the right fabric, didn't match our clothing values, right? So just think a little bit about what kind of help you might like. And there are many free resources. So there's programs that are free and there are programs that are very expensive. So it just depends on the level of depth you want to go to and who feels like the right vibe. It's a little bit like dating with getting the right fit. It has to feel good. That you have to feel like that person understands you. So that's very important. I think the other thing that people can do to start considering this work is to, I don't want to say get some therapy.
We should all do that anyway.
Right. We're all in therapy anyway. But really, really do some digging into who you are and what it is you really want, not just what your parents want or what you think you should want based on Instagram. I heard this great. I'm working right now with a woman named Kate Northrup, and I'm doing some studying with her about money and nervous system healing, which is brilliant. And she had a guest on named Noah Levy, and he said this great thing. He said social media, it's like compare and despair. What great. So then what he said was instead of compare and despair, observe and swerve. So if you see something that you really like, you're like, oh, what do I like about that? How does that fit with who I am? What do I not like about that? And what am I not going to do? Right. So that when you're scrolling through social media, you're not just sort of unconsciously consuming this idea of who you think you should be. I love those videos on social media where they show home influencer's house and then they swing the camera over to like the entire mess on the floor on the other side. That's reality. We all live life in cycles. We all live life in cycles of mess and tidiness and mess and tidiness. And I think that's really important to try to get as connected as you can with who you are. And one of the ways that I help clients do that is literally ask them, who are you when nobody is looking? When you're not thinking about your kids, you're not thinking about your parents, you're not thinking about your friends, you're not thinking about your dog, you're not thinking about any of those things. If you were absolved of all of those responsibilities and conditions, who are you? What do you love to do? What did you love to do when you were 3, 4, 5? Right? And how can you work towards integrating those things more fully into who you are now? It might be bringing some things out that you lost along the way. It might be brushing off some layers of what somebody else told you you were or how you should do something. Like, for example, in my world, I'm a great teacher. I'm fantastic, but I hate the elementary school environment. Hate it, hate it, hate it. Too rigid, not learner-centric enough. It's like learning, it's a system that's, hundreds of years old that is not actually working for today's learners. And it just encourages mediocrity and there's no common sense. Bothers me, right? Hate it. But everything I'm teaching right now, here we are, right? This is a much better environment. So it's really thinking about, your skills and talents and those kinds of things. You don't have to exercise them the way that someone else thinks you should. Think about who you are.
And I'm interested to hear if you find this with your clients too. But I find with some of those questions where it's like, what did you used to enjoy, or what sort of things do you like if you dropped all the conditioning? It's sometimes not a question someone can answer in 5 seconds because they've never asked themselves the question before. I find
Oh,
sometimes they'll take a few minutes and they might
no.
have an answer, then they sit on it for a day or two, then they come up with a different answer. What has been this process, whether it's for
Right.
yourself or you've seen clients? Like, is it something that you find that some people, it does click with them straight away, or does it take a bit of mulling over and contemplation and deconditioning?
Mulling and deconditioning. I had a beautiful example of that actually with my mother-in-law, who is going through a transition right now. She's 72. And my father-in-law passed away in 2019. And I asked her, like, what do you really want? And she was like, I don't know. She spent her whole life worried about other people and serving other people and not really thinking about what gives her joy. And not only what gives her joy, but what gives her joy if it's not in service of somebody else. Like, she likes to make Christmas stockings, but is it the craft or is it the fact that she's people pleasing? Like, what's really going on? So when I'm working with clients, I use a lot of different ways in, right? So sorry, that just sparked something for you. What?
No, it was good. I was
You
like,
just went,
people
ooh,
pleasing is a big one.
right? Yeah. Codependency. Yeah, no. Individuation for the win. So for her, and for other clients, I use a lot of different techniques. So I will sometimes do verbal techniques because people sometimes like to verbally process. So I'll ask questions and get them just to talk, or I'll get them to voice journal on something. It's just stream of consciousness, voice journal. And then we can go back and review it and pick out what was important. Or I get people to draw or get people to use different colored markers and Post-it notes, because also psychologically, if you're brainstorming on something and you get stuck and you switch to a different color marker, that actually starts the engine again, tells your brain to reboot. Super cool technique. Sometimes I do movement with clients. Feel your way into something, sense your body yes, sense your body no. So because everybody learns differently, right? You have oral learners, they need to hear it to learn it. You have verbal learners, they need to say it. You have kinesthetic learners. They need to move before they can do it. There's all different kinds of processors. And so when I'm trying to help people think about what they like and to break through that a little bit, I use a lot of different techniques to do it. And I also use a lot of encouragement. And I love to ask the question, you can take this question for free. If somebody doesn't know the answer, I'm like, you don't have to know the answer right now. That's okay. But if you did know the answer, what might it be? Right? You're nodding. Yeah, you've seen this question before. It's a great question because what it does is it tricks your brain into thinking it has to have some perfect answer. And it's like, oh, well, if it's just a might, like we're not talking about what you're going to do. We're just talking about what you think you might do. And that seems to open up the gates as well. But it definitely does require some deconditioning and some deep thinking.
And so when someone has done this sort of work, I really like the question. If just play a game with me, like if you were to know the answer to this, or if you were to, just fictionally. So once everyone has the data points, how do you start to put that into a look? Like you mentioned, what does a banker look like? And you can get sort of a rough idea, or a lawyer. Chances are they're probably wearing a suit. How do you start to make that tailored to you? So, for example, when I think of clothes, I think of whatever I'm comfortable in. Look of the outfit is probably secondary, but comfort and function is primary. I'm assuming that's where I would enlist help in someone who actually knows about colors and what colors go with my skin, that sort of stuff, to help pull outfits together. But how would you approach that?
Well, I do all the elements of design. So that's color, shape, line, weight, texture, but sheen. And that's just the visual elements of design. And then I look at your clothing values. So you've just said that your sensory value is quite high because you like comfort. And then somebody might have, excuse me, somebody might have a high influential value, which means they want to dress to impress. Some people might have a high economic value, which means they want to either spend as little as they can on clothing or spend on clothing, but that will last a long time. So they get good value out of that piece. So we look at the elements of design, we look at the values, we look at the personality style, because somebody, like, for example, most of my clients that I work with have some element of natural, that archetype about them, because they generally, like me, like to be comfortable, like to look good, don't want to work too hard to do it. Right? We do attract who we are. But I do have some clients that are like high dramatic. And so they are willing to endure a little less comfort to get a look. So this is how the personality style plays into it. So once we gather all that information, and I have a bunch of different tools and techniques to get it, then we start looking and say, okay, which brands design things that look the way that you might like to look? So for example, if somebody was very romantic, I loved like florals and flow and pattern, maybe like a Dolce & Gabbana would be a beautiful fit for them if they're looking high-end designer, or somebody who does something like that, but is not as expensive. Somebody who likes to combine a suited look with that kind of softness, then like Forever 21 is not Forever 21, Evernew is a great store for that, right? So what we do is we take all the information and then build a profile for that person and say, here's your elements of design. And then we start shopping. And this is where I hate it, but I can do it. So my personal record is a complete wardrobe, including accessories and shoes, in 3.5 hours. It's kamikaze shopping.
Awesome.
But when you know what works for you and you know what you're looking for, it's faster. It's so fast. I can literally go into a store and go, nope. Oh, that. Okay, let's try that. Good. And then leave. You don't have to browse unless you enjoy it. You don't have to like wander through 85 stores. You're like, I'm looking for this in this color, in this style, in this size. Do you have it? Yes or no? I'm out. Or I'm in the dressing room. It's very, very structured and specific. So it's functional, which I love. I still find shopping, it's tiring, right? You're trying things on. It's a long day. The stores are often really hot. You're walking a lot. So if you're going to shop in this way, then you need to prepare for it. And usually it's with a professional that can help you with it. And if you are looking on your own, even if you are someone who likes to wander, at least you have in the back of your mind, oh, I know I'm looking for this. I need a jacket. I know it needs to be in this color range. I know this is kind of the style. right, as I'm wandering through the mall getting a latte, I'll just take a little browse. I'll stand at the front of that store and see, is there anything that might work? And then I can find the things, or you can find the things that way. So it really depends. Some people are bulk shoppers like me. I shop once every 2 years. I do a big shop and then I'm done. And then maybe I might add one or two things along the way, but no, pretty much not. And some people are grazers, browsers. They like to, it's like recreational shopping. They like to do that. Some people are um, retail therapy people, right? They shop for comfort. So everybody's a little bit different, and that's how the execution goes. And now with online things, you can do a lot of the browsing at home.
I was just thinking about the different types of shopper when you talked about the retail therapy shopper. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like trauma inducing to me.
Right? I know. I'm not a fan of retail therapy, but I do love a good moisturizer. So there are times when I will go looking for like something really delicious. Just like
Yeah.
skincare.
Yeah. Scented candles would probably be my version of skincare. Yeah.
Downfall. Exactly. We all have something.
And so, who is best suited to this type of work? What sort of person would benefit from the support of an image consultant, or just looking at the image and how they're showing up in the world in general?
Yeah. I generally work with people that are over 30 because they already have a little bit of an idea of who they are and where they want to go. And then they have a little bit more focus. And they also have more financial means, right? It's not cheap to work with me. So I think that's who really benefits from working one-on-one with a professional. But I do think that people that are early stage career work really need to look at some free resources and think a little bit about how they're showing up so that they don't end up looking like every other 20-year-old that shows up on the scene, right? That they do a little bit of inquiry, that they think a little bit about, they observe what else is going on in this workplace. How might I be visible to people that are likely to advocate for me or likely to promote me? Not just my boss, but there's probably other people across the office that are paying attention to what you're doing. That doesn't mean everyone's looking at you all the time, but people pay attention. People start to know who you are. So my husband just recently transitioned careers. So he was in corporate doing logistics and he transitioned to film editing, which he really loves, should probably have always been there. But you know what? It is what it is. Sometimes we get into places and get a little bit stuck. So he made the transition into film editing and he decided, we had some conversation about it, but he decided that he wanted to show up in a vest and a tie because that was what he had always worn to work. Jeans, vest, a tie, rolled up sleeves. That's how he wanted to show up. And I'm like, great. So he showed up like that for the first year of his work. And he still does wear that sometimes. It's a bit hot right now. So he's wearing linen shirts instead. But sure enough, if people didn't remember his name, if someone said the vest and tie guy, everyone's like, oh, that guy. Yeah, that guy's great. Right? He cultivated a particular visual signature that was sticky, that people remembered. And anyone at any age can do that. And the other person that really benefits from working with someone who's a leadership presence coach or someone who's an image consultant, depending on their field of specialty, is someone who's looking to go into senior, like ascend the corporate ladder. Or for me personally, I work really well with people who think they might need to get out, right? It's a little bit of both. So I support women who are going up the chain, like C level or higher, and help them ascend. And there are clients that I've helped realize, oh, this is not the right fit. We need to find you a different environment or a different career or a different industry. The very first client that I ever had when I had finished all my training, she wept. She was like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong job. And I'm like, yeah, you're in the wrong job. So anyone who has that sense of like, or like I have achieved things, but I don't feel quite as good inside as I do outside, that's like a perfect sweet spot for me personally. And I have other consultant friends who prefer to do the outside that work better for other people. But generally, anyone who's transitioning, anyone who is conscious and wants to achieve different results, and anyone who's starting out would benefit.
I love your term a visual signature. I just, that's stuck with me. I think at any point in time, we are showing people who we are. And so by looking at how we show up as our visual signature, I love that reframe. It definitely would get me to consider how I show up a bit more in my day to day.
Yeah. It's like, because you're an athlete, you're a coach, you're a trainer. So for you, it would be, how do I, first of all, make sure everything's your color and your body type and all those kinds of things. But it would be, how do I show people that I'm strong and athletic every day, vital every day, right? How do I show people that without showing up in a tracksuit, right? How do I give, like, so maybe if you had to wear a suit, maybe it would have to be a suit with a lot of stretch in it. Or maybe it would have to be a suit that had some athletic kind of details on it. There are suits that are beautiful, fashionable suits that have like racing stripes down the side, right? Maybe you cultivate a beautiful collection of excellent sneakers and that becomes a signature piece for you, right? It's this kind of crafting that's really valuable to think about. It's like, how do I want to show up? Like for me, I always really like to have great eyewear. I have to wear glasses anyway. So I have 6 or 8 pair that go with different things. I like that. And people remember it, right? People remember the hairdo. Like, I love it. It works really well for me. And it gives people a bit of an idea of who I am when they see me.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it earlier. People are going to judge. We are always making choices based on safety. Like, are you safe to talk to and everything like that? So I think you might as well acknowledge that and accept it and influence it in a way to help people perceive you in the way that you want to be perceived.
That's right. Work with what you have, work with what you know. And so, like, when I talk to people about this judgment piece, because people will decide about your intellect, they'll decide about your socioeconomic status, they'll decide about where they think you might live, they decide what education level you have, how smart you are, like all of those different things they're deciding before they even have really decided. And I don't tell people this to make them afraid of judgment. I tell them so that they can go, oh, so if I want the perception to be accurate, what do I need to do to help that be accurate? Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So if I want people to know I'm smart, I'm probably going to pay a lot of attention to the details in my outfit, make sure I look really well put together because it makes me look intentional. It makes me like, oh, this person has thought about what they're doing. Right? If I want to be approachable, then I'm probably going to wear one of my ball caps and like I have a matching set that's got wide leg pants, super comfortable, boat neck, but it's a sweatsuit, but it's quite polished.
I
Right?
love the idea of a
It's like
polished sweatsuit.
you want to show people who you are. Actually, there's a funny story. So I wrote my first 2 books in like 2020 through 2022. And I went to my first writer's retreat and I packed my leisure clothes, and my leisure clothes are all really beautiful, but I love them, but they're so comfortable. Like I've entered my house dress era. And so I had this beautiful gray dress that I got in Bali that was $10 and it's so comfortable, but it's like plunging neckline. It's got an off the shoulder cut and it's just like fits me beautiful. It's gorgeous and it's like feels like pajamas. And I have this beautiful poncho essentially that's like this nice gray woolly with the tassels. And that's what I wear around the house because it feels really good. It's super comfy. It looks great. And so at the writer's retreat was another one of my writing friends who has since worked with me as a client. But at first she's like, when you first came in, I was like, who is this woman swanning around here? Like all dressed up, right? And then she's like, and then I realized that's just who you are. And you had all these outfits that were leisure outfits, but they really looked great. And I was like, yes, because I want to be comfortable and I want to look good. I want both and I get to have both. And so do you. So actually it was quite funny because when we started working with her, there was a variety, like she ended up getting this one gorgeous emerald, like bright Kelly green sweatsuit. And it looks fantastic on her. And then it's mixed and matched with a bunch of other pieces. But basically, when she's lounging around in her sweats, she looked great now too.
I love
Gotta
that.
be who you are.
100%. Oh, that's so good. And so you've shared such incredible insights and tools throughout this whole entire episode. But I would love to hear if the listeners will be like, okay, cool. I understand this. I want to improve my visual signature. What is a really actionable step someone can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to help improve their visual signature?
Look in your closet and get rid of everything that doesn't fit and doesn't feel good. Number one, because you need to make space for the change. And the second thing, if you want to go a bit farther, is start looking for help. Start looking for someone, either free resources or a professional that you can look for. If you're looking for a professional, check their certification. There is the Association of Image Consultants International it's aici.org, has a site, Find an Image Consultant, and you can find somebody who's certified, who actually knows what they're talking about and has the credential to prove it. You can start looking for help, look for blogs. And then the third thing is to get your priorities in order about what you want to invest in, because it does cost money to invest in your image, but the return on investment is very high. I have had clients make as much as a 10-to-1 return on the investment that they made with me in just their image alone, where they've gotten a raise, they've gotten a promotion, they've gotten a new position, they got married, they got dates, they got all kinds of things that they didn't have before, simply because they were working on their presence as a person. And remember, it's never the clothes. It's always the clothes. It's never you. So if something doesn't look quite right, that's the clothes' fault. That's not you. Go find what works for you and do that so that you can be more of who you are and that people can see you for who you are more clearly.
We're going to mic drop it right there. I don't know what else we can add to that. Was a really great way to summarize this whole episode. Thank you. And so if someone's keen to learn more about the work that you do specifically, where can they find you?
So my website is lzrkconsulting.com. You can also find me on Instagram. There are not many Katherine Lazaruks around. I'm easy to find. So if you want to shoot me a DM on Instagram, that's great. If you want to contact me through my website, also great. There's an application process and my assistants will be happy to set you up with that. And then I would love to talk to you. And if you want to pre-order my book, Executive Being, Humanizing Business One Leader at a Time, it's available now on Amazon. And if you send me a screenshot of your receipt, we will send you a signed bookplate that you can stick in your book with a signature.
Amazing. And I'll put those links in the show notes for anyone who's out and about. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. I thoroughly enjoyed it and I look forward to unleashing this on the world.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope this was helpful. If you thought of someone while listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could share this episode with them. While you're doing that, please also take a moment to leave a review on the podcast if you haven't yet already. It takes less than a minute and it means so much to me and helps this podcast to reach more people just like you. Thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, go out and achieve every dream you have, because actually, you can.